The cool autumn air whispered through the half-open window as I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the glowing monitor. It was a late Thursday evening, and the quiet hum of the neighborhood had always been my solace. Jessica, my wife of 10 years, was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the soft, bluish glow. She had been distant lately, but I chalked it up to her demanding job at the advertising firm. Life had been hectic for both of us, or so I thought. "Who's Sarah?" Jessica's voice cut through the silence, sharp and laced with suspicion. I looked up, confused. "Sarah?" She held up my phone, her finger pointing to a text notification. It was from Sarah, a coworker of mine who had been coordinating a client presentation with me. "She's a project manager," I said cautiously, sensing the trap forming. "We've been working on the Hawthorne account together." "Why?" Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Why does she feel the need to text you at 9 p.m.? Is this work or something else?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Jess, come on. It's work. She probably just had a last-minute update. I'll check it if it bothers you that much." "It's not the text," she shot back, her voice rising slightly. "It's the late nights, the random calls, the way you're always glued to your laptop. You're not even here half the time, Ethan." I blinked at her, stunned. "Jess, I'm working. For us. For this family. What are you even saying?" Her gaze didn't waver. "I'm saying I think there's more going on. I think you're cheating on me." The words hit like a sucker punch. My first instinct was to laugh it off, but the hurt in her voice stopped me cold. "You're serious?" I asked, incredulous. "Jessica, I would never. How can you even think that?" She crossed her arms, defiant. "Because you're acting exactly like someone who's hiding something. You think I don't see it? The way you guard your phone, the way you conveniently have to leave early and come home late? Do you think I'm stupid?" Her accusation hung in the air like a storm cloud. I wanted to lash out, to demand she take it back, but instead, I chose calm. "Jess, I've been working overtime because our team is under a lot of pressure right now. That's all this is. I don't know how else to prove it to you." She stared at me for a long moment, her jaw clenched. Then, without another word, she tossed my phone onto the couch and stormed out of the room. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind wouldn't stop racing. Jessica's accusation felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else. We'd had our ups and downs, but this level of distrust was new. Where was this coming from? The next morning, she was back to her usual self, or at least pretending to be. She kissed me goodbye as I left for work, but the warmth wasn't there. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The distance between us felt like a chasm, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to Jessica's behavior. She was the one acting strange now, more distracted than usual, constantly on her phone, and quick to end conversations when I entered the room. One evening, I noticed she had changed her phone's passcode, something she hadn't done in years. "Jess, why'd you change your passcode?" I asked casually as we cleaned up after dinner. She froze for a moment, then shrugged. "Work policy. Security updates." It sounded plausible, but something about her tone didn't sit right. A knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. The turning point came a week later. Jessica was at a work dinner, a phrase that had started to feel like code for something else. As I cleaned up the house, her laptop buzzed with a notification. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, but my curiosity or paranoia got the better of me. I glanced at the screen. The message was from Marcus Bennett, her boss. "Marcus, tonight was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." I froze. The air seemed to leave the room all at once. My hands trembled as I stared at the message. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath me, leaving me unsteady and breathless. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the evidence was damning. My wife, who had accused me of infidelity, was the one who seemed to be crossing the line. When Jessica came home that night, she was her usual composed self, chatting about her dinner meeting as if nothing was wrong. I watched her carefully, every word she spoke grating against the storm brewing inside me. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to know the full extent of what I was dealing with. Over the next few days, I began to investigate. I went through her phone when she wasn't looking, checked her messages, her emails, her social media. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Jessica was having an affair with Marcus. It wasn't just a fling either. There were hotel bookings, shared photos, and messages that made my blood boil. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I thought back to her accusations, her jealousy, her constant needling about Sarah. It wasn't guilt over my actions, it was guilt over her own. And now I knew the truth. But what was I going to do about it? Couldn't sleep. For days, my mind replayed the discovery of Jessica's betrayal like a broken record. Each text message I'd read, each piece of evidence I'd found, burned into my memory. My wife, the woman I had trusted implicitly for over a decade, was sneaking around behind my back with her boss. Every interaction with her now felt like walking on a bed of nails. She would smile at me over breakfast, casually talk about work, and even joke about her coworkers. But all I could see were the messages from Marcus. "You're incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." The way she had so easily accused me of cheating made sense now. It was projection, pure and simple. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not without a plan. A week after I'd discovered the truth, Jessica left for another work dinner. This time I decided to follow her. I parked my car a block away from the restaurant she had mentioned and waited. About 20 minutes later, I saw her step out of her car, wearing a dress that was far too elegant for a business dinner. She was all smiles, her face glowing as she walked toward the entrance. Moments later, Marcus arrived. Tall, confident, and wearing a tailored suit. He greeted her with a lingering hug that told me everything I needed to know. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. It took every ounce of self-control not to storm over there and confront them on the spot. Instead, I took photos. If she wanted to lie her way out of this later, I'd have proof. When she got home that night, Jessica was all chatter. "Oh, the dinner went great," she said, pulling off her heels and setting them by the door. Marcus was his usual self, cracking jokes, keeping everyone entertained. Honestly, it's exhausting sometimes. I stared at her, barely able to keep my composure. "Sounds like a real charmer," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. Jessica froze for a split second before recovering with a forced laugh. "Yeah, well, that's Marcus for you." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the photos in her face and demand an explanation. But instead, I swallowed the anger. I wasn't done gathering evidence. Over the next few weeks, I dug deeper into Jessica's life. I hired a private investigator to tail her and Marcus during their work trips. The investigator was thorough, providing me with a wealth of information. Photos of them entering and leaving hotels together, timestamps of their rendezvous, even audio recordings of their conversations in public places. "Ethan," the investigator said during one of our phone calls, "I'm going to be honest with you. This isn't just a fling. They've been seeing each other for months. They're comfortable around each other, like they've built a routine." Months. My stomach churned. How long had I been living a lie? How long had Jessica been smiling in my face while stabbing me in the back? One evening, Jessica sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I sat across from her, pretending to read a book but watching her carefully. Every so often, she'd smile at her screen, her thumbs moving quickly over the keyboard. "Who's texting you?" I asked casually. She looked up, startled. "Oh, just Madison from work. She's asking about tomorrow's presentation." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. But I knew better. I had already cloned her phone using software I'd found online. Every message she sent, every photo she received, it all synced to my device. And tonight, as she smiled and typed away, I saw the real conversation unfold. "Marcus, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Let's skip the morning meeting and grab breakfast at the hotel instead. Jessica, you read my mind. I'll meet you in the lobby at 8. Took everything I had not to explode. That night, I couldn't stay in the same bed as her. I claimed I had an early meeting and went to sleep in the guest room. But I didn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a growing desire for revenge. Jessica had accused me of cheating, made me feel guilty, and nearly destroyed my confidence, all while carrying on an affair with her boss. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. The next morning, I started my plan. First, I anonymously sent a package to the HR department at Jessica's company. It included copies of the photos, text messages, and emails I gathered, all pointing to an inappropriate relationship between her and Marcus. I knew the company had a strict policy against such behavior, especially for someone in Marcus's position. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure he paid for it. Next, I uploaded a folder of evidence to a private server and scheduled it to release to Marcus's competitors if anything happened to me. I wasn't naive. Marcus was a powerful man, and I knew he wouldn't take this lying down. But I wasn't going to back down either. Finally, I prepared for the confrontation with Jessica. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would lay out the evidence, and how I would handle her inevitable excuses. This time, I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. That evening, I waited for Jessica to come home. She walked in, carrying her usual air of casual confidence, completely unaware of the storm brewing in our living room. "Hey," she said, dropping her purse on the counter. "What's for dinner?" I stood up, holding the stack of evidence in my hands. "Jessica, we need to talk." Her smile faltered. "About what?" I placed the stack of papers on the coffee table between us. "About Marcus, and about how you've been lying to me for months." Her face went pale. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, just as quickly, she shifted into defensive mode. "What are you talking about?" she said, feigning confusion. "You're not making any sense." I picked up the top photo and held it up for her to see. It was a picture of her and Marcus, arm in arm, walking into a hotel. "Explain this." Jessica's jaw dropped, but no words came out. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. "Explain it," I repeated, my voice cold. She finally looked away, her facade crumbling. "It's not what it looks like," she muttered weakly. "Oh, really?" I snapped. "Because it looks like you've been screwing your boss while accusing me of cheating. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? How disgusting it feels to be lied to every single day?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was done being the victim. Jessica's hands trembled as she reached for the evidence I had laid out. For a moment, I thought she might try to rip it to shreds, as though destroying the paper could erase what she had done. But she didn't. Instead, she just stared at the photos, the hotel receipts, the messages. All undeniable proof of her betrayal. She started, but her voice cracked. She sank onto the couch, her face pale. "I don't know what to say." I crossed my arms, standing over her like a judge awaiting a plea. "How about the truth? That'd be a nice change." Her gaze darted around the room, as if searching for an escape route. When none presented itself, she finally spoke. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said quietly. "It started off innocent, just harmless flirting." "Innocent," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "Hotel rooms, Jessica. Late-night texts. Months of lying to my face. Does that sound innocent to you?" She flinched at the venom in my words, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "I wasn't happy, Ethan," she blurted out. "You were always working, always distracted. I felt invisible. And then Marcus, he noticed me. He made me feel special." I laughed bitterly, pacing the room. "So it's my fault now? I was working to keep this house, to provide for this family, and that's your excuse for screwing your boss." "It wasn't like that," she protested, standing up. "It wasn't just about sex. He listened to me. He cared about how I felt. And I didn't?" I shot back. "Do you even hear yourself? All those times you accused me of cheating, made me feel guilty for working late. You were the one lying. You projected your guilt onto me, Jessica." Her silence was damning. She had no defense, and she knew it. The next few days were a blur of tension and avoidance. Jessica stayed out of my way, and I stayed out of hers. Every interaction between us felt charged, like a live wire ready to snap. I had no intention of letting her off the hook, but I wasn't sure what my next move should be. Part of me wanted to throw her out, to end our marriage right then and there. But another part, the part that still remembered the good times, the years we had spent building a life together, hesitated. And then there was our daughter, Lily. At just 6 years old, Lily was the light of my life. The thought of her growing up in a broken home tore at me, even as my anger simmered just below the surface. I couldn't let Jessica's choices ruin Lily's childhood. But I also couldn't pretend everything was fine. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, Jessica tentatively approached me. She looked exhausted, her usual confidence replaced by a wary nervousness. "Ethan," she said softly, "we need to talk." "About what?" I said without looking at her. My eyes were fixed on the TV, though I hadn't processed a single thing on the screen. "About us. About what happens next." I turned to face her, my expression cold. "You don't get to decide what happens next, Jessica. You lost that right the moment you decided to betray me." She swallowed hard, tears glistening in her eyes again. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But please, Ethan, don't let this destroy our family. Lily doesn't deserve this." I scoffed. "Don't you dare use Lily as a shield. You should have thought about her before you started sneaking around with Marcus." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this," she said desperately. "I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with Marcus. Just, please, don't give up on us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Could I forgive her? Could I even begin to trust her again? The rational part of me screamed no, but there was a small, flickering ember of hope buried beneath the anger and betrayal. I hated that it was there. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I said finally. "You've broken something in me, Jessica, and I don't know if it can be fixed." That night, I sat in the guest room, replaying our conversation over and over in my head. I wanted to believe she was sincere, that her tears and apologies were genuine. But then I thought of Marcus. His smug face, his expensive suits, his audacity to think he could waltz into my life and take what was mine. The anger came rushing back, hotter and more consuming than ever. Forgiving Jessica wouldn't be enough. I needed justice. I needed revenge. The next day, I reached out to an old college friend, Nate, who worked in cybersecurity. If anyone could help me dig up dirt on Marcus, it was him. "Nate," I said when we met for coffee, "I need a favor." He raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that could ruin someone's life," I said bluntly. Nate studied me for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "This about Jessica?" I nodded, clenching my fists. "Her boss, Marcus Bennett. He's the guy she cheated with. I want to make sure he pays for what he's done." Nate sighed. "Ethan, you know I'm not in the business of revenge. But I'll see what I can find." Within a week, Nate had delivered. Marcus wasn't just a cheating scumbag. He was also involved in some shady business deals. Fraudulent contracts, embezzlement, tax evasion, the list went on. "Is this enough?" Nate asked, sliding the files across the table. "It's perfect," I said, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "Time to show Marcus what happens when you mess with the wrong man." I leaked the information anonymously to the media. Within days, Marcus's empire began to crumble. Headlines blared accusations of corruption, and federal investigations were launched. His reputation was in tatters, his company in free fall. Jessica, too, felt the fallout. As the scandal engulfed Marcus, she became collateral damage. The whispers at her office grew louder, and within weeks, she was let go. She came home that day in tears, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her bed. "You wanted him so badly," I said coldly. "How does it feel now that he's destroyed your life too?" She didn't respond. She couldn't. The house had become a battlefield of silence. Jessica moved through the days like a ghost, avoiding me whenever possible, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. This was her punishment, after all. But instead I felt hollow. Revenge wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. Marcus Bennett, on the other hand, was reaping the full consequences of his actions. His face was plastered all over the news, his company under investigation by the FBI. Former colleagues were coming forward with testimonies, each more damning than the last. Every morning, I would sip my coffee and watch the coverage, feeling a grim sense of vindication. But the fallout didn't stop there. Started with a phone call. Ethan Carter? Yes, speaking. This is Linda Carson from the law offices of Carmichael and Myers. I'm representing Marcus Bennett in a defamation case. Mr. Bennett is filing a lawsuit against you for disseminating false information that has caused irreparable harm to his reputation and business. I almost dropped the phone. Excuse me? False information? You've got to be kidding me. Our client maintains his innocence, she said crisply. We'll be pursuing damages in the amount of $5 million. You'll be served the official papers soon. Have a nice day. The line went dead, leaving me stunned. When I told Jessica about the lawsuit, her reaction was immediate and visceral. Ethan, what did you do? She demanded, her voice trembling. I did what you couldn't, I shot back. I exposed Marcus for the fraud he is. Her face twisted in anguish. You've ruined everything. Do you even realize what this means? We could lose the house, our savings, everything. You should have thought of that before you decided to cheat, I snarled. Jessica stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe I had gone too far. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and mounting expenses. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Valerie Quinn, did her best to reassure me. We have a strong case, she said during one of our meetings. But lawsuits like this can drag on for years. Are you prepared for that? Prepared? No, I wasn't prepared for any of this. Between the lawsuit, the mounting legal fees, and the emotional toll, I was barely holding it together. My work performance suffered, and soon my boss called me into his office. Ethan, he began, folding his hands on the desk. We've noticed a decline in your productivity. Is everything okay at home? It's complicated, I admitted, avoiding his gaze. He sighed. I understand, but we can't afford distractions right now. Take some time to get things sorted. Consider this a warning. A warning. One step closer to losing the job that had been my anchor through all this madness. Meanwhile, Jessica filed for divorce. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Whatever we had is gone. We're just hurting each other at this point. I stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down on me. So that's it? You destroy our marriage, and now you get to walk away. It wasn't just me, Ethan, she said quietly. We both failed. I wanted to argue, to shout that it was all her fault, but deep down, I knew she was right. Our marriage had been a ticking time bomb long before Marcus entered the picture. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Jessica demanded full custody of Lily, claiming I was too unstable to be a responsible parent. She painted me as a vindictive, obsessive man consumed by revenge, and the court bought her story. When the judge awarded her primary custody, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Losing Jessica was one thing. Losing Lily was unbearable. I'll still let you see her, Jessica said after the hearing. But only if you can prove you're capable of putting her first. Her words stung, but they were a wake-up call. I had let my anger consume me, and in doing so, I had jeopardized the most important relationship in my life. By the time Marcus's lawsuit was settled out of court, a deal that cost me nearly everything I had, I was a shell of my former self. I had lost my wife, my daughter, my job, and most of my savings. Revenge had come at a cost I hadn't anticipated, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. One evening, as I sat in my nearly empty apartment, the weight of everything finally caught up with me. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably for the first time since this whole nightmare began. The emptiness of my apartment mirrored the emptiness inside me. The walls were bare, stripped of the photos and decorations Jessica had taken when she moved out. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, a constant reminder of the life that had once filled the space. I sat on the couch, if you could call the sagging second-hand thing a couch, staring at a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the coffee table. It had become a nightly ritual, my only companion in the silence. The memories of what I had lost haunted me. Jessica's laughter, Lily's squeals as she jumped into my arms, the sense of purpose I'd had when I still believed in the life we'd built. Now all of it was gone. The downward spiral began in earnest after the divorce. With Jessica gone and Lily's presence reduced to a few supervised visits a month, I felt unmoored. My job, which had been a lifeline, finally slipped through my fingers. I was let go after missing one too many deadlines, my boss's patience worn thin. "You're a talented guy, Ethan," he'd said during my exit meeting. "But you're not the same person you were when we hired you. I hope you find your way back." Find my way back to what? The days blurred together, marked only by the monotony of bills piling up and job applications that went unanswered. The few friends I had left grew distant, tired of my bitterness and self-pity. Even Nate, the friend who had helped me uncover Marcus's skeletons, stopped returning my calls. "You need to get help, man," he'd said the last time we talked. "This obsession is destroying you." He was right, of course, but hearing it didn't make it any easier to pull myself out of the hole I'd dug. One afternoon, as I was nursing a hangover, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jessica standing there, holding Lily's hand. My heart ached at the sight of them. "Hi, Ethan," Jessica said, her voice cautious. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside, unsure of what to say. Lily ran past me, her small backpack bouncing as she darted toward the living room. Jessica lingered by the door, her arms crossed. "She wanted to see you. I figured it'd be good for her." "Thanks," I mumbled. She looked around the apartment, her brow furrowing at the state of it. "Are you okay? Why do you care?" I snapped, regretting it the moment the words left my mouth. She sighed. "Because whether you like it or not, we're still tied to each other through Lily. And she needs you, Ethan. But not like this." Her words cut deep, but I couldn't argue. That night, after Jessica and Lily left, I stared at the mirror in the bathroom. The man looking back at me was unrecognizable. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, and defeated. I hated him. For the first time in months, I didn't reach for the whiskey. Instead, I picked up my phone and searched for a therapist. Therapy was slow, grueling, and uncomfortable. The first few sessions felt like I was ripping off a scab, exposing the raw wound beneath. But as the weeks passed, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. My therapist, Dr. Lee, didn't pull punches. "You've been consumed by anger and betrayal," she said during one session. "But revenge didn't give you closure, did it?" I shook my head. "Because revenge isn't about healing," she continued. "It's about control. And the truth is, you can't control what Jessica did or how Marcus acted. The only thing you can control is how you move forward." Moving forward felt impossible at first. But slowly, I started taking small steps. I updated my resume and began reaching out to old colleagues. I cut back on the drinking and started going for runs in the park, finding solace in the steady rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. Most importantly, I focused on rebuilding my relationship with Lily. During our visits, I made an effort to be present, to set aside my bitterness and anger. Her laughter, so pure and unburdened, became my lifeline. One day, during a particularly reflective therapy session, Dr. Lee asked, "Have you thought about apologizing to Jessica?" The question caught me off guard. Why should I apologize? She's the one who cheated. "True," Dr. Lee said, "but you also made choices that hurt her and yourself. Sometimes an apology isn't about absolving the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment." The idea stuck with me. A few weeks later, I called Jessica. "Hey," I said when she answered. "Do you think we could meet? Just the two of us. There's something I need to say." She hesitated. "Okay. When?" We met at a small cafe, the kind we used to frequent in the early days of our relationship. Jessica looked wary but curious, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. I'm not here to blame you, I began, or to dredge up the past. I need to apologize. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. I let my anger get the better of me, I continued. I hurt you and I hurt myself in the process. I thought revenge would make me feel better, but it only made things worse. I'm sorry, Jessica, for everything. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she nodded. Thank you, she said softly. I'm sorry too. For what I did. For how I hurt you. For the first time in what felt like forever, the tension between us eased. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a step toward closure. That night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like I had a chance to rebuild. Not the life I had before, but something new, something better. The air was crisp and clean as I stood in the park, watching Lily chase a flock of pigeons. Her laughter echoed, light and carefree. A stark contrast to the storm that had dominated my life for so long. It was one of my first unsupervised weekends with her since the divorce. A small victory that felt monumental. Daddy, look, Lily called, holding up a stick she had found. It's a magic wand. I smiled, kneeling down to her level. What kind of magic does it do? She scrunched her face in concentration, waving it dramatically. It makes people happy again. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I reached out, pulling her into a hug. That's the best kind of magic, sweetheart. Over the following months, life began to take on a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was steady. I landed a new job at a smaller tech firm, the kind where people cared more about quality of life than grinding employees into dust. It didn't pay as much as my old job, but it gave me the time and mental space I needed to focus on what truly mattered. Jessica and I kept our communication cordial but limited to co-parenting. The apology had been a turning point, but it didn't erase the pain or the damage. Still, there was a fragile understanding between us now, a mutual effort to put Lily's well-being above our past mistakes. One evening, as I was helping Lily with a school project, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Why don't you and Mommy live together anymore? I froze, the glue stick slipping from my hand. That's a hard question to answer, Lily. She tilted her head, waiting. I took a deep breath. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big ones, and when that happens, it can be hard for them to stay friends. But even if Mommy and I aren't together, we both love you very much. That'll never change. She seemed to accept that, returning to her glitter-covered poster board. But her question lingered in my mind long after she'd gone to bed. The final piece of my healing came in the most unexpected way. One morning, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with neat, precise handwriting. Ethan, I owe you an apology. It was from Marcus. I won't make excuses for what I did. I hurt you in ways I can't begin to justify, and I've paid for it in more ways than one. Losing my company, my reputation. It's a small price for the damage I caused to your life. I've started over, trying to be a better person. I hope, someday you'll be able to let go of the anger and find peace. You deserve that. Asterisk asterisk. For the first time, I didn't feel the familiar rush of rage at his name. Instead, I felt nothing. It was as if the weight I had carried for so long had finally been lifted. A year later, as I stood on the sidelines at Lily's soccer game, I realized how much had changed. Jessica was there too, cheering alongside me. We weren't friends, not yet, but we were partners in raising our daughter. That was enough. After the game, Lily ran up to me, her face flushed with excitement. Did you see my goal, Daddy? I sure did, I said, sweeping her up in a hug. You were amazing. She grinned, her missing front tooth making her look even more adorable. As I watched her run off to join her teammates, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Epilogue. Sometimes, I still think about the man I used to be, the man consumed by anger and betrayal, blinded by a thirst for revenge. He feels like a stranger now, a cautionary tale from a past life. I've learned to let go of the bitterness, to accept that some wounds will never fully heal but that life goes on regardless. And in the quiet moments, when Lily laughs or the sun sets just right, I'm reminded that even in the darkest times, there's always the possibility of light.